Hey, so I am here with Peggy Hackney, and Peggy Hackney has been a mentor and teacher of mine for almost 20 years, for about 16 years. And Peggy's also one of the founders of Integrated Movement Studies and a founding director. Peggy also wrote a really seminal book that I think moved our field forward in profound ways called Making Connections, Total Body Integration through the Bartenieff Fundamentals. Peggy was part of the group that developed and revolutionized the touch for movement repatterning. Peggy is both a Laban Bartenieff movement analyst as well as a notator. And so she just has been in the field in so many capacities for such a tremendously long time. And so today, what I'm talking to Peggy about is how she sees the work historically, how she sees it developing and growing and continuing into the future, and sort of, I guess, what has kept her interested and current in it through all this time. So I think, Peggy, if you want to start, great. So, Peggy, when you think about the time that you've had uh, within the Laban Bartenieff system, I think my first question is, now, given all of the time and experience, when somebody asks you what the Laban Bartenieff system is, how do you go about explaining it? What's important that they know?
Well, I feel that the Laban Bartenieff system is one of the broadest range systems for looking at movement and how movement is life and how movement is meaningful in our lives and how we can thereby dive more deeply into our own lives and bring it out more clearly for other people. So it's looking at the largeness of movement and meaning, expression, how we each have our own personal movement signature, and how understanding that we do each have our own movement signature means that we can start to then be able to relate to other people more clearly by being able to perceive what they're doing with their movement and what they're saying, so that we're not only just listening to the words that they're saying, but we are getting what is their investment in this? Like, are they really present and invested in this life moment? And that also, over the numerous years, this is my 59th year in this system. And that's one of the things that's kept me interested, is in seeing how this system is broad enough to encompass not only my physical self and forming myself bodily, but also tuning into my own inner emotional state, my own intellectual ability. One of the reasons I went into this field was because I had chosen to go to Duke University to major in chemistry, and I was definitely interested in science. I had a scientific mind, and when I discovered the Laban work and the ability to use my analytical skills while also delving into my physical skills, my emotional skills, my own inner spirit, and finding out something about that, I was like, wow, this is home for me. And that has been one of the things that has kept me in this field. Many times over the years, being a dancer, of course, is challenging in our society because the general society does not value dance.
Oh no.
Yes, or arts in general. They're never valued like the sciences are. And so to be an artist scientist was something that was really interweaving aspects of myself that I felt were crucial. And I discovered subsequently, of course, that Rudolf Laban was also both a scientist and an artist, and that a lot of people that go into this field have that intermingling and weaving.
Yeah, I really hear in this, and I think this was also part of what brought me into it, was the ability to be really specific and analytical about what I was either doing in my own movement or seeing in others. So there was something concrete and tangible I could I could see and know and name. And it was from that specific concrete thing that I could develop a cluster of associations, of understandings, of meaning. It felt like for me in the beginning, and still does, but I think that was one of the things that just popped for me, was that I wasn't just making it up. I could say, see, I see that thing or those things. They're happening there. And that's what's reminding me of all these other things. And that allowed me to feel like there was a maybe an honesty um, between the concrete and the interpretive or the meaningful. That felt really good. It felt really good.
And I think
So,
one of the things we
oh,
also do in relation to that is we encourage people to speak from their own meaning. So we don't have the feeling of saying, you were angry. I saw you being really depressed or whatever, but in my own experience, this is what I'm feeling, and associating, and the imagery that comes to me and the metaphors that are resonant around this moving. So that, I think that also is one of the things that stays with me and um, feels really honest, because
yeah,
I can't know what someone else is feeling. And
yeah,
we really we can see what they're doing, and we can speak about what they're doing and then check with them. And so how is that resonating for you as you're moving?
yeah.
In your presence, I feel this myself as the witness.
Which I think what you're articulating is also present, is that there's a way that we can go into the experience of our moving selves, go into what we feel in our tissues, and honor that as something that can be known and something that's worth being known in a way that helps us organize our sense of ourselves, our world, our relationship, but that there's a knowledge within the moving self that can be called and valued. Do you want to speak about that too? I feel like that's so core to the work you've done.
Yes, I really feel that embodied knowing is a major way that we, all human beings, um, make major decisions in our lives. Most people out there um, do not really realize that they're making these huge major decisions about who to marry, who to live with, who to work with, from something that is part of their own internal movement expression and is a value that they have, that they could tune into more deeply if they would spend time listening to their body and being in that moving place in that moment. And I think that that's another aspect. The moment is something that I feel we really recognize that we are changing moment to moment to moment. One of the prime things that Irmgard Bartenieff taught me was constant change is here to stay, and that you can't live in the past, you can't live in the future. If you're not here in this moment, you're missing your life. Of course, I also learned that in Buddhism, that very clear being in the moment. And I feel like that supports my spiritual life, and that spiritual life also then is reflected back in the work that I do and develop in embodied knowing. As Carolyn Moore says, unfortunately, we are a cognitive minority that believe that there is knowing in movement, that movement is a way, an inroad into knowing. But that is one of my prime beliefs, and I think that is one of the baselines of the Laban Bartenieff work. So if you know, that's something we have to offer the world, that the world needs. Because otherwise people are waiting for somebody to tell them the way the world is, and they're not able to then say, well, where am I in my knowing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, even as a dancer, a performer, we can see the demands of the field, the professional field, what's needed, you know, whether you need to get your leg very high or do multiple turns or whatever it is. But a lot of times that is somebody telling you from the outside, this is what you need to know, as opposed to finding what it is that I, as the artist, want to express from my own inner self, and being willing to follow that impulse into movement. That impulse is where life is. And if I'm not doing that, I'm not living. So one of the things our other colleague, Brenton Chang, says is that the Laban movement analysis work helps him live a higher resolution life, so that each, you know, like in a digital photo, each dot is a little bit clearer because there's more that he knows about it.
Yeah, he can question.
Oh, okay.
For today, which is when you think about the future of this field, of the Laban Bartenieff field, what is it that you see developing, or what are some of your hopes and dreams for it as it marches forward in time?
The field itself, I hope, will continue to grow and look and see what is it that we may need to broaden in the way that we teach, or the way that we have even formulated the theory. What are we missing? Maybe there's something we're missing. Maybe there's something we're afraid of dealing with. And looking at that as then, because if we don't continue to grow and change, we're going to die. And I think that the field of movement as a way of knowing is too important to let it die. And after having put 59 years into it, I am still engaged, and I'm engaged because each person brings something new to the material. And as the younger people come in, like as you're taking over the program, you have the consideration of what's needed at this point in time. I have the knowledge of what was needed maybe 20 years ago to get us to this point. And you and the colleagues of your age know so much about what is going on today in culture that needs to be addressed. So I'd like to see the field continue to broaden, but also to deepen. So to come from deeper roots within our own embodied beings. And I think delving into body knowledge is a huge part of that. I think looking at each of the categories of body, effort, shape, space, but then the big category I think that needs more work and is so potentially powerful is phrasing. And because we can have the same elements, and if we phrase them in different ways, they will definitely yield different results.
Yeah.
And I think that training people in phrasing to perceive the phrasing, you're really participating in the change process in a phrase, of course, and that we could learn more about the change process itself in studying phrasing. So I'm hoping in the future that there will be numerous PhDs done on phrasing, but not just intellectually PhD. I think that's one of the major reasons that I resisted getting a PhD, that I felt I didn't want to lose the full embodiment. And so much time in the PhD work is spent in the intellectual and moving your little fingers on the computer. That I feel I want exploration in the field to go on about phrasing in larger groups, larger change processes, and facilitation. I feel facilitation could happen even in I don't have the skills to do this, but to have like facilitation in political discussions and things like that, so that a political discussion with an entire community doesn't devolve into just polarities of two sides, but asks larger questions, finds embodied ways to get people to explore the issues and feel what it would be like to be in the shoes of the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I see that there's huge growth potential. And one of the things that we have that a lot of people don't have in their field is we have a love of each other as colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel one of the reasons I stay in the Laban work is because of you and all of my other colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
Janice Meaden, Pam Schick, Ed Groff, et cetera, people around the world, and that I continue to meet around the world that are taking the work and taking it somewhere, whether it's in Italy or Germany or Holland or wherever. So, I mean, I see that we could learn more about interrelationship of cultures clearly through looking at movement patterning and seeing what the value is in the movement. I experienced that when I was teaching at the Hong Kong Academy of Performing Arts for a month. I could see how the interaction with a different culture brings out new possibilities of movement in me and in other people. And I think that we have a fear at this point of having certain nations that are sometimes interpreted as being evil or whatever. And I just feel like we need to drop that and be with that culture in a way that appreciates them for what they are, and hopefully that they would do the same for us. And if it could be facilitated in some way, you know, well, this is crazy probably, but maybe the United Nations could have movement sessions.
Yeah. And a way of bringing forth that there might be movement-based values and codes that we are unconscious or in our subconscious, that we are then applying expectations to the way that other cultures would behave, which is maybe creating the tension or creating the glitch.
Exactly. Yeah.
And if I could start to see that I have this thing that I think very quietly, because one of the things that I think we haven't really said, but that's been underneath this conversation, has been that there is what we feel on a body level, and then there's the language that we use to describe it. And so much of our world lives in the language world. Okay. And yet oftentimes our language is reflecting something that's happening or understood physically. And for most people, that's a disconnected understanding. I think one of the things that the Laban Bartenieff material and IMS trains is for us to be in the interplay between the felt physical experience and the language.
Absolutely.
And also in the other direction, the language impacting the felt physical experience. And so I think what I'm hearing and what you're saying is that culture, like when we're dealing with these major tensions, whether it's between two countries or even multiple cultures within my own village, that some of what's happening, or maybe at the heart of this tension, is values, prejudices about the material codes, the physical codes of the other, which are then becoming these major. But at the heart of it is these very subtle perceptions of what's happening on the body level.
Yes, I agree. Good
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
Take us there.
Mhm.